Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty After Dark. After a nice little hiatus, we were just talking about how long it's been since the last episode, about a month since we recorded, but I'm your host, Calvin Timms. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin and my co-host, Dynasty Dale, over on Twitter at Dynasty Dale. Dale, how's it going today? You ready to talk some 2023 quarterbacks?
I'm really excited to talk about this class. Has some really interesting backs in it, and some potential studs in it.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I know people have been talking about the 2023 draft class forever now, and a lot of the hype, it feels like, has been let out of the sails the last couple of weeks. People are not as hyped as they were, and I hear one of the biggest reasons is the quarterbacks have not been as good as some people kind of wanted, but, you know, there's some potential. There's a lot of guys there. So for those out there that are joining us, we're going to be breaking down my top tiers of Dynasty quarterbacks for the rookie draft class in 2023. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat to this because not everyone has declared for the NFL draft just yet. So some of these guys could even go back to college, but I think it helps to familiarize yourself with some of these names now just to kind of know their skill sets and what they're able to do. And then it just helps you for next year when they do actually come out, if that's the case. So, gonna break into these guys. I got them ranked into a couple tiers. Dale watches a lot more college than I do. I touched on all these guys, kind of checked up on their stats, watched a little bit of video on each one of these guys, but these are pretty early rankings. After the combine hits, it's going to change things a little bit. You know, it's going to always move some of these guys. And as I have time to watch these guys a little bit more in depth, and ironically, I have the Alabama-Kansas State bowl game on the other monitor, so I do get to see one of the top candidates in Bryce Young as we're talking through this podcast. But I'm gonna try and not let that influence my decisions too much just yet. We're gonna make sure we do it right in the offseason and really evaluate these guys properly. So, you ready to get into it, Dale?
Absolutely.
Before we get started, I guess, do you have any major thoughts on the 2023 draft class for the quarterback position?
It's my biggest point. It's kind of going off what you said, that they were really hyped in the beginning of the year, and it's really kind of deflated. It's really kind of watching some of these quarterbacks that were hyped up in the beginning of the year not do as well, and it's kind of the quarterbacks have fallen. I don't want to say they've fallen flat, but they've fallen a little bit as they were in the beginning of the year a few
Yeah,
months ago.
yeah. That's what it feels like, all these guys. Everyone's always so hyped about college, and it's just, I hate college football. I was talking with Dale right before the podcast started, and it's like I'm watching I'm watching this bowl game here, and like Alabama gets a touchdown because the cornerback doesn't even touch the wide receiver the entire route. It's like these guys it's completely different leagues of players here. But, you know,
Absolutely.
defenses in college are just, it's so hard to project what they're going to be able to do. And when you only play like two good defenses in a year, it's kind of tough. So that said, enough kicking around the bush. My top tier, and we're going to be going through these guys, my tier one of quarterbacks for the Dynasty 2023 rookie class. And again, this can change, but as of right now, I've got CJ Stroud as my number one, and that's probably pretty shocking. And I'm not trying to, really come across as a hot take artist or anything like that, but CJ Stroud, 6'3", 215 pounds, from Ohio State. 3 years, well, basically 2 year starter. He didn't play much as a freshman, but he has been very solid the last couple of years. Now, this year, he's taken a pretty big step back in terms of his yardage. He's only got 3,300 yards this year versus 4,400 last year, but he did have Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson last year. And I know that Ohio State, Dale, you can speak to this as the Ohio State fan, but your wide receiving core is ridiculous, like nonstop. You guys are just pumping them out right now. It feels like
all the time. Yes.
you guys have who is it? You guys didn't have Jackson Smith and Jigba basically all year, right? He was
Yeah.
injured all year.
Yeah. I think he played about a half a game this year all
Okay,
total, all the games.
there you go.
And then and then and then we have Marvin Harrison Jr. He was tremendous this year.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was I
Who's
think
the
his
other guy?
name
The
is
okay, you can say his name probably better than I can. Ibuketi, is that it?
it is Emeka Egbuka is his name.
Igbuka. Okay,
Egbuka, yes.
I've
Yep.
heard that dude is
Yep.
legitimately insane.
Oh, he is fast. Like he's kind of like the Garrett Wilson or like Curtis Samuel, uh,
Perry.
type.
Yep.
Yeah, Perry.
Yeah, that's one thing with Ohio State. So you guys have been able to pump out very quality players the last couple of years. The team's pretty good offensive line generally, good running backs and everything like that. So the big dip in form is kind of surprising, but again, you take into account he lost 2 first-round wide receivers, lost another potential first round with Jackson Smith and Jigba, who we'll talk about in the wide receiver episode. So he kind of lost his top 3 wide receivers. Plenty of depth there behind them, but if you don't have the same repertoire with those guys, it's going to be a little bit more of a learning curve there. But I think the biggest thing is there was a massive drop off in the attempts this year. 441 last year, only 355 this year. Completion percentage dipped a little bit there, but not too much of a difference. And then the touchdowns were still actually pretty high. He had a higher touchdown rate, or just a little bit less of a touchdown rate this year. But 37 touchdowns, 44 last year, still pretty good. He found a way to get it done regardless of losing all those guys. So CJ Stroud is going to be my number 1 guy, and the biggest reason for that is I feel like he is the safest. He's not a small guy, which is kind of the biggest knock on Bryce Young, which we'll talk on here probably in a little bit. But CJ Stroud he's a nice sized quarterback. You like to see it. And the biggest thing for me is he is a pocket passer. He has not got much mobility. And I know that's kind of going the way of the dinosaurs now, but I think that CJ Stroud, you can speak to this a little bit more than me, but he is an athletic guy, right? Like he's not kind of like rest in peace Dwayne Haskins, but he was kind of chunkier. He wasn't really the fastest guy, couldn't really do anything out of the pocket. CJ Stroud, I feel like he can do stuff out of the pocket. He just chooses not to, is what the kind of the vibe that I get from him. What do you think about that?
Agree with that. I actually for Stroud's first play as a Buckeye was actually a very long rushing touchdown back in 2020
Yeah.
the field. So he is mobile. He is able to run. I feel Stroud's a very intelligent quarterback, and he knows offense where to
Mm-hmm.
go with the ball. I do think some of the time that he gets cute sometimes, just and throw it away, and instead of stepping up in the pocket and being able to run and stuff like that. I kind of wish he would have done that more this year.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I, I feel the offense for Ohio State became very predictable, so I think that hurt a lot of their offensive potential because they were doing a lot of these bubble screens. They were doing a lot of these kind of cutesy things that
Mm-hmm.
isn't necessarily in the NFL as much compared to
Yep.
what he was doing last year with throwing it down the field, which he is able to do. Like I mean, I don't think he has the strongest arm in this class, but like he
No,
knows where to place the ball to
I think he's one of
for
the
his receiver to get it.
Yeah, and that's what I was gonna say. I think he's one of the more accurate guys. Like again, I think he knows how to work the pocket. And again, you look at his rushing stats for the last couple years, and he's got the. I was looking at his rushing stats, and the way that college does it is the dumbest way ever. I was complaining to Dale about this. So I don't actually know what his rushing stats are because I guess they count sacks against you as rushing yards in college, which is stupid. So like 2021, he has 32 rushing attempts for negative 20 yards. Okay, great. So I can't give you an actual number from the stats that I found on him, but he just doesn't do it very much. He doesn't like to get out of the pocket very much, and that's one of the biggest downsides on CJ Stroud. Again, I think he has all the talent and the ability to do it, but he just feels comfortable in the pocket, which I like that. And that to me, that makes him the safest option, knowing he's going to be a first round pick, knowing that he's probably going to a team that's, going to be, I'm guessing he's going to go somewhere probably, you look at all the teams that need him, probably like the Panthers, maybe somewhere like Washington. Maybe Washington can trade up and get him somewhere like that. So he's going to go somewhere with some decent weapons and a decent offensive line, in my opinion, because he's probably not going to be one of the top two picks in this draft class. So,
I agree.
so I think that it's actually better for him, and that's why I think he's going to be the safest one. I think that he has the talent and the upside to be the best one of this class. Well, I guess upside for fantasy definitely goes to my number 2 guy here, which we'll talk on here in just a second. But yeah, CJ Stroud is going to be my number 1 guy. I like him quite a bit. You know that he can do it. And the other biggest knock on him, and you can talk on this again as well, and this probably lends to the predictability a little bit that you were talking about, but the biggest knock on him is that he's a one-read quarterback, just like Justin Fields. And, all I've got to say to that is it seems like that's kind of Ohio State's game plan every single week. They have such good wide receivers that they can just get open so quickly, so you don't really need to be a multiple read wide receiver, which, okay, that's fine. It's the Big Ten. It's not the best competition every single week. And if your guys are open, you throw it to the open guy. Who cares? Like, oh, do I need to pass open the wide open guy to throw it to my number 2 read just so that people think I'm better at it? Like, it's not a very good, compelling argument. You know what I mean?
That and I think he was trying to do more of that this year, and that may have been because the talent was. I mean, there still was a lot of talent in that wide receiver, but I don't think it was as comparatively as what it was last year with having all those guys there. So
Yeah.
I think he felt he had to pick up some of the slack because the offensive line wasn't playing as well. And then in some games like the weather wasn't as good. So I mean, it's beforehand that I kind of feel he's very much like Jared Goff in that he's from the California area anyway. So I feel he has to have decent weather conditions to play to that excellent standard that he's able to do. And
Mm-hmm.
he's going to be on, and he's going to be hitting players left and right, and it's easy and certain. So I mean I would like him. I would honestly like to see him go and play like in Detroit, which having a good offensive line is going to help him out and feel more
That would be
comfortable in the
awesome.
pocket.
That
He-
would be awesome.
I mean, I think him with the lines would be great. I think the spot for him would probably
Probably be Houston, right? If he went number
well,
1 overall.
Houston. I personally go a different way. I don't think they're crowd. They're probably going to go after something different, but that's for about that player later.
Right. So, all right. So that's enough on or on Justin Fields, CJ Stroud. It's Ohio State on your brain. But and speaking of Justin Fields, did I tell you this yet? But Megan got me a Justin Fields jersey for Christmas. Oh, I'm so excited. I love it. As everyone gives me crap because I'm a Patriots and a Bears fan. Like, I grew up outside of Chicago. They've just been garbage my entire lifetime. Now they finally have a player that I'm excited about. So everyone's like, you can't root for 2 teams. Why? Okay, whatever. But yeah, I'm
He
pretty
can.
excited for Justin Fields, man. I am
I am too.
so excited. And that Fields jersey is just so nice. It's the navy one with the orange one. Oh, just so clean.
Yeah.
So clean. But CJ Stroud. Hopefully he can be as good as Justin Fields, maybe a little bit better of a passer than a rusher like Justin Fields. But yeah, he's my number one. And basically, like I said, right now it's early rankings, but it all comes down to he is the safest, in my opinion, out of all of them. We'll talk on some guys later that they have a lot of upside, but they're a lot of risk, and when it comes to the NFL, at least for the rookie drafts, one of the things that I'm done doing personally, and I don't fault anybody for doing this, but I'm done kind of betting on the physical outliers and in the negative sense, right? Like, I still love Kyle Pitts because he is a physical freak of nature. He's a unicorn. You can't be that size, that speed, and everything, that the whole package that he is, and be bad, in my opinion. We've seen what he can do as a rookie. Didn't get all the touchdowns, but the usage was there as a rookie. I am fine betting on those kind of physical outliers, DK Metcalf, that type of player. But the guys like we'll talk on some of them here, but like Baker Mayfield, one of the biggest knocks on him was he was just under 6 foot tall. And it's tough for these guys to come into the NFL and play when you're the smaller quarterbacks, right? Kyler Murray, he's got the rushing upside, but from a pocket standpoint, we can see what he can do when it's kind of the line of scrimmage is muddied. He can't see over those big guys as well for his receiver. So I'm kind of done betting on the outliers, and that's the biggest reason why the guy that we mentioned earlier, Bryce Young, isn't in my top tier here. But the other guy that is in my top tier is a physical outlier in the other direction, the positive direction, right? And that's going to be Anthony Richardson, the quarterback from Florida. Now, Anthony Richardson, 6'4", 236 pounds. They're already projecting him to run a sub 4.4 40. So
Yeah,
he has,
absolutely.
yeah, he is basically Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson on steroids from a rushing standpoint. The dude is legit on the ground. But the downsides for him, again, he's a very high ceiling player, but he is very raw. We've seen that he basically only has 1 year as a full starter down in Florida. He played half a season last year, only had 64 passing attempts in the entire season last year, so that was not great there. He had 51 rushing attempts last year for 400 yards. As a quarterback, that's just ridiculous, but and 3 touchdowns in half a season, So in his full season as a starter for Florida, there's a lot of things with Florida that I don't really like. They're a very good school. They're in the SEC, so they have very high level competition, good defenses that they play on a more regular basis. But on the ground this last year, 103 rushing attempts for 654 yards, 6.3 per carry, which is pretty good. I mean, it's about the average of a running back down there, but he had 9 touchdowns on the ground. But then through the air, this is where he's a little bit more raw. He's more of a Justin Fields type of player. 327 passing attempts, only a 54% completion percentage, 2,500 yards, and 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Now, the other knock on Florida as a whole is their receiving core is probably not the best. You know what I mean? They just don't have the same level of athletes that, Alabama or some of these other top schools have at wide receiver. So that does hurt them a little bit there. And I'm just pulling up to like their top target on the season in terms of receptions was Xavier Henderson with 38 catches. So they just do not have those guys there right now from a passing standpoint. So that's the biggest knock is, he's raw through the passing game, but we don't know if it's raw because the team is just not built for it down there in Florida, or if he needs to take a step forward. Maybe it's a little bit of both. Do you have any thoughts on Richardson?
I feel Richardson is capital RAW. He was raw, 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 raw all day. So that
Yep.
I like his. I feel he's one of those freaks, like you were saying. Going back to the Justin Fields comment you made. It's the difference between him and Fields is that Fields in college was a very excellent passer, and he was able
Yes.
to
Yep.
make
I agree with
he
that.
was able to make consistent downfield passes where Richards
Richardson.
very
Go ahead.
I feel for Richardson is kind of Wilson in that he's very athletic. He's able to get out of the pocket. He's able to make plays,
Mm-hmm.
but that's really where that ends for me. And, I can see him making some of those plays, but I can also see him, having a very, very low completion percentage and throwing a lot of picks and not
Yeah.
being able to read the defense. That's
Yep.
that's what
Yep.
really concerns me.
So here's the thing with Richardson and draft. This is early rankings again. I'll just reemphasize that. But the biggest impact that is going to be on his stock in the rookie drafts for you is whether or not he's a high first round pick. And the reason why is if he's a high first round pick, he's probably going somewhere to start right away. And I think that would be terrible for fantasy football because honestly, I just don't think that he's a guy that can come in and play day one. I think he is somebody that does actually need
Like,
to kind of sit behind someone. But if he goes, I still think he's going to be a first round pick for sure. I just don't know where he's going to end up going yet. Maybe we'll get a better feel on it later after the after the athletic testing where he is just going to blow everybody out of the water. Maybe it's going to raise
yeah,
his draft stock a little bit there, but if he goes
yeah, no,
somewhere, if let's say he goes to the Detroit Lions, we talked about them for CJ Stroud, and I would love that for either one of these guys. But, Detroit has 2 first round picks. I think their pick is right now in like the 15, 16 range right there. And then they have the Rams top 5 pick. Let's say that with the top 5 pick, they get some defensive player, whoever it is. But then with their pick, they take Anthony Richardson. Goff is going to be starting next year in 2023, more than likely, unless he gets injured. I would love to see him sit behind someone like Jared Goff. And then you get a little bit of time to, mature, get used to the NFL. And then next year with that offensive line, those weapons, oh my goodness, that'd be huge. So I think draft capital is going to have the biggest impact on probably Anthony Richardson than any of these other guys in the top 5, 6 that I do have here in my top tiers. So what do you think about his landing spot? Do you think it's that impactful?
I think it's I guess I do. I think that's going to be what tells him up in rookie drafts or what's going to keep his stock a little bit. So, I honestly I wouldn't be shocked if it gets picked by the Ravens. Honestly, I know that sounds crazy
That would
because
be interesting. They let Lamar walk. I just don't think they could
Marco,
do that,
yes,
but
I, I I honestly think that Lamar is going to walk himself. I think he's
they're going to
doing
franchise
what.
tag him. So that's the thing.
Yeah,
Now
probably true,
Lamar is
true.
going
That
to
that's true.
he might hold out like the pull Lev Bell. We don't know, but they are definitely going to franchise tag him. They're not going to let him walk. And I think that's the only thing with the Ravens is if they're not getting Lamar, I don't think that they're going to go in that direction again. But you know, Anthony Richardson, like we talked about, he's very raw, but for fantasy football, he is literally everything you want. He's a big dude, massive rushing potential, and a cannon for an arm. He's basically Trey Lance, kind of, with less production in college, right? So I like Anthony Richardson quite a bit. The athletic testing is going to help him out. Draft is going to be very impactful for him, but I think that for right now, when you're looking at your rookie drafts, especially in super flex leagues, I think that there's probably only 3 or 4 first round quarterbacks in your super flex drafts. And that's just kind of what to expect, right? So and the reason why we're kind of talking about these guys now is so you can kind of prepare yourself for your rookie drafts. And I know those are probably a couple months away, but it's the beginning of the offseason. Everyone's got fantasy championships here tomorrow, and you're kind of looking forward to the picks and your offseason moves a little bit, trying to plan those out. At least I am. So when you're looking at the first round of your rookie draft, you're looking at these guys and, if I have the 110, who am I realistically going to be getting? You might be able to get someone like Anthony Richardson in the late first round. I think that he's going to ultimately be a first round rookie pick because he's going to be a first round NFL pick. That's how it's going to go. There's CJ Stroud's going to be a first round pick. Bryce Young, the Alabama quarterback, is going to be a first round pick. Will Levis might be a first round. That's probably it for first round quarterbacks, in my opinion, in a super flex league. So, that just kind of gives you, and by the time we get through this whole thing, so we're going to go through every position. We're going to go through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and then we're going to give a consensus ranking, first round, second round, third round kind of guys here, and just give you my opinion on all these guys and where they're going to fall. So, Anthony Richardson, again, I think he's going to be a first-round rookie pick. He's probably going to be a little bit later. And if you're looking for a guy that you need to start in 2023, he is not someone that I'd be looking to kind of go with here this next season. So any final thoughts on Anthony Richardson before we move on?
No, I agree with everything you said. It's. I mean, ultimately, it's going to be where it's where he lands. I kind of hope he goes somewhere that has some talent around him. I think him in Indy would be bad,
Yes. Yep.
horrible for him, and growth could be it's because he would have to be the starter. You know,
Mm-hmm.
honestly, for him, going to Washington, good spot with having some of those faster players and
Mm-hmm.
there's where he's able to just react and kind of play off of his skills.
Yeah, I agree with you. So we will see. Like we talked about, his landing spot is going to be very critical on his potential. But I think that he's someone that if he hits for fantasy, man, you have your next Josh Allen. You've got your next, Justin Fields kind of guy who's just a physical freak and can just smash it. So now that is it for my top tier guys. And like I said, I don't want to be shocking with this, but Bryce Young is the one guy that I have left out of my tier 1. I do have him in my tier 2, but, he wasn't a top one, and we'll talk on him here in just a minute. So we're going to take a little bit of a break. We'll be right back with tier 2 of the rookie rankings for 2023. All right, guys, welcome back to group 2 of my Dynasty 2023 quarterbacks for your rookie drafts. In tier 1, we talked about C.J. Stroud and Anthony Richardson, and leading off tier 2 here for me. And again, I'm not trying to be hot takey or anything like that, but I actually have Hendon Hooker over Bryce Young. I have both of these guys as my tier 2 quarterbacks, but I have Hendon Hooker above Bryce Young. And again, people are going to probably not like that very much, but here's the thing. Hendon Hooker, he's older. I understand that completely. 6'4", 218-ish pounds, and he's a super senior. He's got 5 years of experience. Didn't play as a freshman, but he's played multiple games every other year since then. Played first 3 years, including 3 games as a freshman. Again, didn't have any attempts whatsoever. So I don't know how you have 3 games. Maybe did a couple of rushing attempts or something like that. I don't look. Yeah, a couple of rushes. That's all he did as a rookie. So first 3 years in college at Virginia Tech. Not a great school, let's be honest there. Didn't really do much through the air. Only less than 100 completions in both of those seasons. But then he goes to Tennessee in 2021. Massive shoot up spike, if you will, as a senior with Tennessee. He had 13 games, 303 attempts, 206 completions, so a 68% completion rate, which is pretty good for 3,000 yards at Tennessee. He had 31 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions. But here's the best part about Hendon Hooker, in my opinion. On the ground, he is pretty mobile. He's a good threat on the ground. He had 166 rushing attempts in 2021 for 616 yards, 5 touchdowns, and then this year he built off that 2021 season. And Tennessee was pretty good this year. And I don't know college as well. I watched a couple college games this year, but Tennessee played tight in a lot of tough games, right? This year he played 11 games total, 329 passing attempts, actually improved his completion percentage, 70% completion percentage, 3,100 yards, 27 touchdowns, only 2 interceptions. So he's very, very smart with the football in his hands. He doesn't make a lot of turnovers, but then again on the ground, 104 rushing attempts for 430 yards, 5 touchdowns yet again. So he's kind of a all-around type of player for me. I really liked Hendon Hooker. I watched him in a couple games, and Tennessee, they're starting to turn around. I think Tennessee is going to be one of the powerhouse schools here in the next couple of years. I don't really know college that well. The coaching changes way too frequently in college for me to, to really understand schools that much. Recruiting, scouting, all that stuff is so much more important. So, and I just don't really care that much. So, I think Tennessee's going to be taking a step up, and I think Hendon Hooker has looked very good since coming to Tennessee, much better than he did with Virginia Tech. If you just take those off and he only had 2 years as a starter at Tennessee, this guy would easily be a first round quarterback option, in my opinion. What do you think on Hendon Hooker here?
I like Hendon Hooker. I feel he was a product of a good offense and having better athletes. So, I don't think he necessarily. I think with the Tennessee offense, they're a very quick offense, and it's almost like the Chip Kelly offense where it's a hurry up style. Like they try to have as many plays as they can to score. So, the product of a lot of that and making quick throws. And then he had Hyatt as his wide receiver one. So I think that helped him a lot. So I like him, but him going down with his ACL injury around things. So that I wouldn't say that but I think that hurts his development 23 because he's still in that camp time. It's to be even ready for around when the season.
Yeah, and I will say with Hendon Hooker, I don't think it's a big detriment. I think teams are going to look at him if if he ends up being a first round quarterback prospect, which I think he's the last one. I think Will Levis, I think who we talked about, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and Anthony Richardson. I think those four are probably going to be first round actual NFL first round picks. But I think Hendon Hooker has the potential to sneak in as the fifth guy. I don't think anybody else is going to jump up here. I think Hendon Hooker is either going to be a second or a first. If he can get first round draft capital in the actual NFL, let's say he goes somewhere like, let's say he goes from Tennessee to Tennessee. Let's say he gets drafted by the Titans in either the second round or, late first or whatever, gets to sit behind Ryan Tannehill for 1 year, recover his ACL. I like him quite a bit. And okay, he's older. Who cares? He's going to be 24 at a position where they play until they're 45 nowadays. So it really doesn't matter that much at quarterback if he's a little bit older. Joe Burrow was older. Who cares? You know what I mean? Like these guys come out and they can if they're good, they're good. And that's basically all it is for the quarterback position. You don't really have to worry about them aging out like you do some of the other skill players. So I will say the best thing, and I know you think that Tennessee does a lot more dink and dunk stuff, but his actual air yards, like attempts and everything, are higher than C.J. Stroud's. They're higher than Bryce Young's, like his yards per attempt, his yards adjusted yards per attempt. So he throws it quite a bit further down the field than a lot of these other guys that are up here. So the fact that he does it well, 70% completion percentage, 68% completion percentage, 27 touchdowns with only 5 interceptions in both years, split over 2 years. That's pretty good. He does not make mistakes. And I like that quite a bit. He averaged 9.6 yards per attempt, 58 touchdowns, and 5 picks with Tennessee. Those are good numbers. That is just great football by this guy. So I think
I
again,
I do agree with that, but also with their offense, they're playing very up tempo and they're allowing the defense to sub a lot. So
sure,
so I feel they were playing fast enough. They were able to confuse a college. Honestly, is really easy to do.
fair.
It really is, and he's playing in the S where there are good athletes, also some trash.
Yeah, that is true.
So and he's playing in the SEC. A lot of teams aren't as good. So I feel he was taking advantage of a lot of his. So I mean, I'm not saying I don't like Hooker. I just don't like him as much
Sure.
because
And
of those
I get
reasons.
it.
It's because of those reasons.
I get it, and like I said, these are raw, but I've actually watched Hendon Hooker a couple times this year, and I've liked what I saw. Like I think I've seen 3 games of his this year, and I liked what I saw from him. I just got a good feeling by watching him, you know what I mean? Like that good gut feeling. So we'll see what he can do in the NFL. Draft capital, again, will be kind of important for him. But the best thing for fantasy drafts is, even if this guy is a first-round pick, I think that a lot of people are going to be in your camp, right? And they're going to be skeptical. And the best part about that is, this guy, I don't see him ever moving his way up into the first round of rookie drafts. So I think that's pretty good. You know, if you can get this guy in the early second round in your rookie drafts, I think it's going to be a steal personally. But you know, that's going to be. This is why we're doing these podcasts now, so you can kind of hear these thoughts, and we're gonna evaluate this. This is not gonna be the last time we talk about these quarterbacks, right? But I wanted to do an early rankings just to see how things change over the offseason, because so many times we have these guys ranked, you know, probably correctly. Like AJ Brown at the end of his college career, right? A.J. Brown was most people's wide receiver 1. Then the combine, then all the stuff happened that offseason, you know, all the workouts and interviews, and people changed the rankings, rewatch all the tape and everything. I think A.J. Brown went from being the wide receiver number 1 in that draft class to like wide receiver 3, 4, 5. And this is for fantasy football, not for real football. And the funny thing about that is, you look at it now, he's wide receiver 1 out of that draft class by far. You know, he's in all Dynasty rankings, he's a top 4 Dynasty wide receiver, and it shows, right? So the fact that these guys can move so much in the offseason is something that we got to be very careful about. And that's why we're trying to get this out there early, so that we can, you know, get a definitive rating on these guys and watch their progress as the offseason commences, right? So Hendon Hooker, I think, again, I don't think he's going to be a first-round rookie pick. Maybe that surprises me, but I just don't see it coming. I think he has a potential to be a first-round NFL pick, and if that's the case, watch out, man. I'm going to be drafting this guy everywhere. Any thoughts?
I think he's definitely going to be. Yeah, well, he's definitely going to watch. You know, I don't see him sneaking into the first round. In the real draft, I can see I see him being like a mid day 2. You know, well, it's second round.
Maybe.
You know,
Here's the thing with
now
these.
I can see upper mid second. I really don't think he's.
The only thing with these quarterbacks nowadays is people are just kind of valuing that 5th-year option on them so much more. So, you know, even if he's probably not, I could see someone trading, you know, 31, 32 for him. If he's going to make it in, like, that's what I'm kind of projecting. I think that he's going to, you know, probably come out. He's probably not going to be valued as a first-round pick by most teams, but somebody might trade him. Maybe they get him in the second round. Maybe they can sit tight. But the ACL injury does definitely kind of hurt his draft stock a little bit more.
It does.
But we'll see where it goes. So Hendon Hooker, the biggest watch for me in this offseason, because like I said, he's my number 3 quarterback right now. Early rankings, I like him enough to put him as my number 3 guy for fantasy football and going forward, but we'll see how that kind of shifts. So any final thoughts on Hooker before we move on?
Nope.
All right, so that leaves us with my number 4 guy, the last guy in my tier 2 here, the Alabama superstar, Bryce Young, who is going to be probably the number 1 overall pick. And people are going to say, oh, you're devaluing the number 1 overall pick that highly, huh? Yes, I am. Because here's the thing with Bryce Young. I just talked about it, that I'm done betting against these physical outliers, right? We talked about it with Anthony Richardson. He's a positive outlier, right? Bryce Young is a negative outlier. Bryce Young is listed at 6 foot 194. Everyone said he's probably more realistically 5'10" and 3/4 and like 190. So he's a small quarterback. Very good, plays for Alabama. You expect him to be pretty dang good, right? But you look at his stats, and you know, it is Alabama, but they just have not blown me away, to be honest with you. He was really good in 2021, very good in 2021, don't get me wrong. But, you know, 67% completion percentage in 2021 on 547 passing attempts. almost 5,000 yards last year, 47 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Good rate there. But CJ Stroud has been better through both of these seasons, in my opinion, stats wise, completion wise, touchdown wise. And, on the ground, there's really not much looking forward to for Bryce Young. He's not the most mobile guy. He does seem to scramble a little bit more than someone like CJ Stroud does, but it's just not really there. And then when you throw in the size concerns, at least for me, I don't like him that much for fantasy football. Now, he's going to be the number 1 overall pick. So he's going to have the longest leash out of all of these guys probably that are going to be drafted in this upcoming draft. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be the best or safest for fantasy football. And go back to what I said about CJ Stroud. In my opinion, he's going to be a probably top 10, top 15 pick in the NFL draft. He's going to be probably the safest because I think that he's better through the air than someone like Bryce Young. I think that he's got more potential on the ground, and he's going to go to a better team because he's going later in the draft. So what are your thoughts on Bryce Young, and tell me why I'm crazy here to have him as my number 4 quarterback for fantasy football?
I hear all your thoughts, and I feel all of them are valid. But I feel I feel last year he played out of his mind. Also with that, like he had a lot of superstars. He was
Mm-hmm.
playing, he was throwing to, and Alabama as a whole was a better team.
Yep.
So I think I feel that has a lot to go into how he played this year, not having as good of a team. You know, he was more of the focal point compared to having Jameson Williams, um,
To me,
and all
though,
those other players. Yeah, yeah.
real quick too, for me, that is a bigger concern. Like that's a massive red flag for me. Like if you take away a guy's talent, like one of the things a couple years ago, one of the reasons why I love Justin Herbert, he put up all the numbers with no first round, second round, third round wide receivers. None of his skill players went in the top 3 rounds of that draft class. I love Justin Herbert because he was able to produce with nobody, right? These guys that can produce with guys, and CJ Stroud is the perfect counterexample to this, right? Because he has amazing guys, but he was able. We already talked about it with CJ Stroud. He took a massive hit in terms of skill players, right? He lost his top 3 wide receivers this year, and still put up pretty comparable numbers. It was a little bit of a dip. We talked about it with him. Go back and listen, but you know he still was able to perform and produce pretty similarly. The big drop off from Bryce Young, when you lose a lot of guys, he lost John Mechie, Jameson Williams, Brian Robinson, and that's pretty much it. He only lost those 3 guys. There wasn't that big of a changeover from year to year, and it's Alabama. You can get any 5-star wide receiver you want. That to me is a massive red flag.
I don't disagree with that. I still think he's going to be up there in rookie drafts.
Oh,
And
for
and and
sure.
and just like what you were saying, he's probably gonna get picked by the Texans, unfortunately. And I don't really see a lot of success out of quarterbacks that are, which that's been the big stick
Right. That's
for
the
for
biggest
for a lot
problem,
of them.
right?
It is, and I completely agree with.
So to me, and the reason why I'm knocking him so much, and because like you just said, he's going to be up there in your rookie draft. He's probably going to be the first quarterback taken. He's probably going to be, Bijan Robinson's probably the number 1 overall pick in almost every single draft, unless you're absolutely stacked a running back. You're going to be taking Bryce Young over him. But to me, that just creates a massive opportunity at, the 3 pick or the 4 pick. It's just going to push some of these guys down because if everyone's taking Bryce Young 102, 101 or 102, and he doesn't deserve it, that just creates a massive opening window for me personally.
No, I agree. So, I mean, I do like Bryce Young, but I think him playing this year really deflated a lot of what the 2021 year he had.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel that's how all these quarterbacks, they're kind of just right now. Like they're, they're really solid quarterbacks. I don't think Bryce Young is that like game changer. I feel he's pretty solid. I feel he's confident in himself, able to make plays. I'm watching him a second ago. Like I like the defense. I feel he can do those things, but I feel his height.
He's
Uh,
definitely got talent,
yeah,
and and with all the negatives,
yeah,
like
he definitely has.
I don't want to get it lost. I'm not just knocking the talent of the guy. He is very good, but he's just such an
Very, very
outlier.
talented.
He's going to go to Houston, who everyone has wanted to rag on for a couple years now, and like I just don't think the situation's going to be good for him. I don't think the talent's very good. The talent of the team, right? Of the Houston Texans. They're going to have to, they still need probably two more wide receivers in that team. And, you know, if you're
Easily.
using the 101 on this guy, it's not going to leave you a ton of the defense is still terrible. So I don't know. To me, there's just too many red flags. And he doesn't provide enough upside for fantasy football for the investment that you're making in him, right? If you're investing the 101,
Yes.
let's just say he's the 101, right? Let's say quarterback, super flex league, you're taking a quarterback first. At least with Anthony Richardson or Hendon Hooker, you know, when they're healthy, they provide a very healthy ground game, right? That's where you're going to get those outliers. And then if either one of those guys can produce through the air, similar, you know, like 4,000 passing yards or whatever, that's where you get those elite fantasy options, right? That's where those guys come in, and that's why they're above Bryce Young. The reason why I have CJ Stroud above Bryce Young is he's better through the air, right? Neither one of these guys are that
Yeah.
mobile, but Bryce Young is worse than someone like CJ Stroud, in my opinion, through the air. So it's just he does nothing better than any of those other guys. But again, he will be the number one overall pick, more than likely. Like the betting favorite right now to be the number one overall pick. So it's just one of those things where you
Yeah.
kind of have to
I
over
I I
explain
I
it.
I I right. No, I agree with what you're, and I find it interesting how the media portrays Bryce Young compared to Stroud.
Mm-hmm.
It's I mean, I'm biased as Ohio State. I know I know I see it a lot different. I a lot more because I watch stuff on I don't like watching, and for several reasons, and a lot of it is because they're more geared towards the SEC players
Yeah.
because they have the SEC
SEC
network,
bias. Yeah.
and yeah. It's the SEC bias, and they also have like it's the ACC bias as well with 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 being under that the ESPN umbrella, you
Mm-hmm.
know. So like for those players are hyped up a lot more compared to or shown on like Fox or Big Ten Network or
Yeah.
whatever other network. So you know, I feel some of these players don't get hyped up because of the platforms that they're shown on.
Yeah, and that's fair. And I will say, you're biased towards Ohio State. And for me to have CJ Stroud as my number one guy, being an Ohio State quarterback, I am biased against Ohio State. I like to root against Ohio State as much as I can because I generally, you're not so bad, but generally the Ohio State fans are some of the worst ever for college. Like
Or
they
no,
just,
I
oh my
agree. I
gosh.
agree. I agree with
They're like Raiders fans for the NFL. They're just so obnoxious. It's like, oh my gosh, please stop. But anyway, so I'm biased against Ohio State generally. So for me to have CJ Stroud means that I must really, I am overlooking my personal bias there. So no, I think that Bryce Young has a lot of tools, and it doesn't mean that he's going to be bad. And that's what like I said earlier when I was talking about the measurables, the outliers, you know. Um, I'm done betting against these guys. They can go and produce for someone else. That is totally fine. But I just don't want to take the risk that they're not going to because, you know, it's worked out the last couple of years, but generally through the course of the NFL, betting against the known, right, does not pay off very well. And when you got these size outliers, these short guys like Drew Brees, he worked out pretty well. Baker Mayfield, not so well. And Baker is more common than Drew Brees is, right? So I'm just done betting on him personally. Doesn't mean he's going to be bad, but again, I just think that it creates such a great buying window in your dynasty leagues for these rookie picks because again, number one overall is probably going to be Bijan. Number two overall, almost universally in a superflex, is going to be Bryce Young. So, you know, stop shooting for those picks. Go for the 103 if you really want one of these other guys and you want another position. So we'll talk on some of the other positions here soon. But that's all I have for my top 2 tiers. Tier 2, Hendon Hooker and Bryce Young. Again, we'll reevaluate these guys as time goes on. But is there anything else you wanted to talk on for tier 2 here before we moved on to number 3?
Tier 2, I am really excited to hear your tier 3 quarter.
Yeah, and this is where we start to get a little bit more into the the potential upside. That's like we talked about. I think there's only potential for 4, maybe 5 first round quarterbacks in the actual NFL draft, and we're now through 4 of these guys. So there's only one left, and we're getting into basically upside and measurables and things like that at this point, where you're going to take a stab at some of these guys. But more than likely, there might be one other guy that has real fantasy value going forward. And then at that point, you just need someone like a Dak Prescott to come out of nowhere, or, Jalen Hurts or someone like that to outproduce the starter. And that's going to be risky. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back sometime here shortly with tier number 3. Hey guys, welcome back to tier 3 of our Dynasty rookie quarterback rankings. So we've been going through the 2023 rookie rankings, and last couple episodes, if you're not watching the overall episode, which I'm going to be putting out here, was tier 1 and tier 2. You can go back and see who we had in those ones if you watch just the individual videos, but tier 3 is going to be pretty exciting. And in all transparency, we did tier 1 and tier 2 a couple days ago, and we're jumping into tier 3 here on Monday after all the bowl games from the weekend. And I gotta say, Dale, I'm liking my my CJ Stroud quarterback number 1 a little bit more, and
I absolutely agree with that. He played out of his mind.
Oh my goodness,
the other night, and
against
I was very proud.
Against the best defense in college football, too. Like, nobody expected that. And the funny thing is, if you go back and you listen, if you're listening to this after, and you probably are, the funny thing is, we recorded that before the bowl game, and I talked about how CJ Stroud, he is a pristine pocket passer. He's one of the best in this class, for sure, in the pocket. But he has all the tools and ability to do things on the move, but he just never does it. And I talked about it on that podcast, and it was just hilarious to me to watch in that game. He started rolling out. He had so many yards on the ground and everything. I was like, That's what I'm talking about, man. So I just saw it. It was just the perfect encapsulation of everything I was talking about in the last podcast. So couldn't have planned that any better. But ironically, we're doing this after the bowl games. The one guy that we're going to be talking about here shortly is the one who had a horrendous bowl game this last weekend, if I remember looking at it correctly. And that is going to be my first guy in this tier, who's going to be Will Levis, who's probably going to be a first-round rookie pick in the actual NFL draft. I don't know if he should be in your rookie drafts or not, but this is the tier where it kind of drops off to... It's kind of the combination of guys who are going to have a lot of draft capital. I think Will Levis, like I said, is going to be a first-round pick. He's got the upside. He's got the tools, but he is way more raw than someone like Anthony Richardson, and I don't think he's as good. I don't think he has as much potential as someone like Anthony Richardson. So we can get into him real quick. You look at his stats, and it's just not great. He's a 4-year player. And my biggest thing when I look at college players, and again, I'm not an expert at college, so you can kind of speak on this a little bit more than me, but, if you see a guy playing for 4 years, most guys come out after 3 because they've shown enough on tape to really solidify themselves for that, right? But if you're playing 4 years and you're not really making a step forward or really kind of upping your game, that to me is a pretty big red flag. And I know that Will Levis is like top 5 rumors. Everyone's been talking about Will Levis to the Colts forever now, which please don't do that. I have to watch you every weekend. Just please don't do this. But if, the guy does have the raw talent, but if he gets that high draft capital, people are going to definitely jump on this guy in rookie drafts. And if he does get super high draft capital, just like Zach Wilson, people don't really like Zach Wilson now today, but he's going to get a chance somewhere else. And, your lifespan on someone like Will Levis is going to be a lot higher than some of the guys we're going to talk about in tier 4 probably here in a little bit. So, Will Levis, like I said, I'm not the biggest fan of this guy, but the reason I wanted to put him up here in this tier is because I do believe he's going to get a pretty high draft capital in the actual NFL draft, and then we're going to, see him around in your leagues for quite a while. So I wanted to talk about him. His stats, again, not the most impressive stats, but he was at Penn State from 19 to 20. And you really got to take 2020 into with a big grain of salt, right? Because that was the COVID year. 2021 was kind of the COVID year too. So it's a little bit of that rolled into it. But the problem for me is in 2022, he played for Kentucky in 2021 and 2022. He didn't really take a step forward, and that's what I was talking about. You really want to see someone with this much experience taking a step forward in their senior year here. 2021, 13 games played, 353 passing attempts, 66% completion percentage, not terrible. 2,800 yards, 8 yards per attempt, 24 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. You don't love to see that. And then this last year, 2022, he only played in 11 games, 283 attempts, 65% passer completion percentage, 2,400 yards, so a big dip there. It looks like they were pushing the ball down the field a little bit more. His yards per attempt went up by a whole half yard, which is pretty significant when you had that many less passing attempts that they're trying to push the ball more further down the field. Big dip in touchdowns, 19 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. So he turns the ball over quite a bit, but on the rushing side, this is where it's a little bit more interesting. And again, I hate the way that college tracks all this stuff, so I have really no idea. But 312 attempted rushes in college for a quarterback is quite a few. Now, the yardage isn't the most impressive because it's only 750 yards, but you take out all the sacks, it's probably closer to somewhere in the 1,000 to 1,200 range, which means he is definitely a threat on the ground, which we love to see for fantasy football. But again, he turns the ball over way too much for my liking. And, a lot of people are comparing him to Josh Allen, who, was pretty raw coming out of college. But I personally don't see the upside that Josh Allen had. Josh Allen he had a cannon for an arm, but his completion percentage in college was much less than Will Levis here. He had a completion percentage, I think, in the 50s coming out, and 66% is not terrible, to be honest with you. Like it's right middle of the pack, but yeah, it's the turnovers that really have me concerned. Do you have any big thoughts on Will Levis here?
It's with Levis, it's when I was doing my write up. I think he's a capable quarterback. I mean, back in his freshman year, I was able to see him play like against Ohio State, stuff like that. And he wasn't really anything special.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he was pretty average, pretty basic, and I get the hype with the size and the cannon of an arm, but he's too much of a rhythm guy to really be a good quarterback in the NFL. I feel he has skills than I would say Zach Wilson because for Zach Wilson, like he just had it for 1 year against really, really bad teams.
Yeah,
Compared to
right.
Levis, like he's I mean in 21 and 22, he was at least consistent in those 2 years. It's the big thing I'm worried about is that like his passing numbers aren't super good. For his last games in college, threw over 200 yards and that was against Georgia where they lost six. So and he threw for 206. So and not thrown for a lot of attempts. I don't know, like I don't know what their plan was. I just feel their offense was a this year because they lost like Wandale Robinson and they probably
Mm-hmm.
lost other players that lifted up Levis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Will Levis had to do a little bit different things this year, and he kind of plateaued.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at his game logs, he because Kentucky is part of the SEC, they do play a little bit more higher level competition there. But yeah, it was just not great. Most of his touchdowns came against the lesser schools, if you will. A lot of his turnovers came against the better schools. So that's just, to me, that's a big red flag. So again, I don't love Will Levis, and I'm still going to give him respect of there's the potential that I'm wrong. You know, a lot of us were wrong on Josh Allen. And the biggest thing with Will Levis is just that if he's drafted highly, which a lot of people out there are linking him to be drafted highly, if he gets that draft capital, and this is so early, he's going to be around for a while. He has the upside, you know, to fill on the ground. So he's someone that I think is going to go way too high in rookie drafts. He's going to get, you know, the Daniel Jones treatment of that draft year. And
I agree.
If you know, he ends up being a first round rookie pick, I'm out completely. He's my quarterback number 5 here. So, you know, that kind of tells you where I'm at with him. He has the tools and the upside. So if you can get him in your super flex leagues in the early second, I'm all for that. You know, I don't mind taking a shot on a guy in the second round there. But for me personally, like we talked about in the last episode, in my tier 2, I really like Hendon Hooker. I think Hendon Hooker is much better. He's about the same size. You know, Will Levis is 6'3", 220 pounds. Hendon Hooker is 6'4", 220 pounds. Both are kind of mobile threats there. And Hendon Hooker has gotten better, you know, through his career, where Will Levis, again, he kind of didn't really improve. He just kind of plateaued there. So I think Hendon Hooker is going to go later, and he's someone I'd rather have anyway. So that's kind of where I'm at with Will Levis here. But there is the potential that I'm wrong. The NFL seems to be valuing him pretty highly. So I just wanted to bring him up here and kind of give him a little bit of the middle ground, because if we knew that he wasn't going to be a first-round draft pick right now, he'd probably be in my tier 4 guys. That's because, like I said, I just do not really see much positives with him to overcome the negatives. But, you know, with all the draft hype that he's getting, I kind of had to respect that a little bit and compromise on my rankings here. Any final thoughts on Levis here?
Yeah, it's the big thing, which I've noticed a trend, if it's for us talking about this, is really the landing spot. So, you know, I think he would benefit from being a late first round compared to an early round, you know, NFL draft pick. But you know, I see going in, and he's probably going to go to a bad team.
Yeah, I mean, even if he goes to the Colts, who, you know, are a bad team, but they're not. I don't know. The Colts are weird because I don't think they're actually as bad as their record is. You know what I mean? But
I agree.
Even if he went to the Colts, here the problem with Will Levis is I think he needs like a legitimate 2 years of setting behind someone to just to hammer him into something valuable. You know what I mean? And I don't think anybody is going to give him 2 years in the first round. You know, Jordan Love got 2 years just because Aaron Rodgers is the MVP back to back. Yeah. So it's just super rare for first round draft picks to get to sit that long on the bench. And I think that's kind of what Will Levis needs. If Will Levis went in like the 3rd round, I think that'd be perfect for him, because it would mean he doesn't have all the hype around it, the potential, and he could sit behind someone for a couple years and then kind of see what he has then. But, you know, just trying to respect the man a little bit here in case I am wrong. So Will Levis is the big name here in my tier 3 rankings. The other guy I did have is Stetson Bennett, who is the quarterback for the Georgia Bulldogs. Georgia, you know, probably one of the best teams in the NFL here. And Stetson Bennett, if you watch the bowl game here this other night against Ohio State, he played pretty well in that game. And, you know, his stats are not the most impressive, to be honest with you. But the one cautionary tale I would say with Bennett here is you do have to be a little careful, because the Georgia defense is so ridiculously good. Rarely does it feel like Bennett has to win them the game. You know, he never really has to go out there and try. And you saw it in this bowl game when the game was on the line. He stepped up and he got it done, you know, and I know the defense gave him chances and everything, but, you know, he was able to get it done. Now, The biggest thing for Bennett, and, again, looking at his stats, they're not the most impressive. He has consistently gotten better, though. He is a senior. This is his 4th year. Came back for one more year. He might be one of the only. Is there ever been a quarterback that's gotten back-to-back national championships? Like, I think Georgia is one of the few teams that's ever done it, right?
Well, I think AJ McCarron about 8-9 years ago.
Did he? Okay.
And
So
yeah,
he's in rare company that he might have back-to-back national championships. And again, I think he went back probably for the name and image likeness, to be honest with you, and also because the team is so good that he probably could get a second title there. So it is kind of weird to see him coming back, but maybe he wanted to solidify his draft status a little bit more here. But looking at his 2 years where he was the full starter the entire year, 2021 and 2022. 287 attempts, 65% completion percentage, 2,900 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Pretty good ratio there. And then you look at 2022, 13 games played so far. They'll have one more with the national championship, so these stats are not finalized by any means. But 396, a big increase in passing attempts from 2021 to 2022. And the nice thing to see here is the completion percentage actually went up. It went from 65 to 68, 3,400 yards. The yards per attempt came down a little bit, so he's trying to push it down the field a little bit less. So it kind of makes sense why his completion percentage went up a little bit, taking a little bit more of the easy underneath throws. 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Again, big dip in touchdowns there, but, that's probably an aspect of them taking away some of those deeper threats, deeper options there. But, was consistently getting better from his junior to senior year here. On the ground, he is a rushing threat. And again, with the college rushing, I can't tell you exactly what he was able to do, but the last 2 years he has 8 touchdowns on the ground. Not bad. Basically 100 rushing attempts over the last 2 years. Not bad at all either. The biggest guy that he and I was talking to Dale about this before the podcast, who he reminds me of when I watch him play, is Derek Carr. Now, I don't really love Derek Carr, but Derek Carr for fantasy has always been solid. He's been good enough to get it done. And I think Stetson Bennett, if he gets any sort of draft capital, and again, if you're back-to-back national champion, it might be enough just to push him into the first round with how many needy quarterback teams there are out there. So any thoughts on Bennett before we kind of break him down a little bit further?
So with Bennett, like you just said that you think he may go in the first round.
I think so. I mean, is there any reason why he wouldn't? That's the question.
He's 5'11", has benefited from a very good offensive line, a very good rushing attack.
To be fair, though, that's the exact same. That's the exact same argument that Mac Jones got to use, though, right? Like,
but I don't think Mac Jones is that good either.
I agree with you, but for fantasy, he's not terrible.
I feel Stetson Bennett is a lot like.
Mm-hmm.
That's I feel for some of the listeners, they probably have no idea who Aaron is.
He busted out real quick.
Yes, yeah, he did. I mean, in college he was a decent quarterback, but I don't think Stetson Bennett does anything special. So I feel he's.
I agree with you, but
I don't think there's any way. There's no way he goes in the first. There's no way. The
only thing I would say is, though, I think people, as a whole, tend to undervalue some teams' desire for just a game manager. I think everybody thinks that these NFL teams, and most of them do. I don't think every team is run poorly, but a lot of these teams are just looking for a game manager. And I know it's not going to be the Niners. The Niners aren't going to go draft him, but let's say the Niners didn't have Trey Lance or Brock Purdy, and they were in the market next year. He'd be a perfect fit for someone like the Niners, and he'd be someone that they'd probably be looking for because we've seen him with a great defense. We've seen him with a great offensive line, be able to just, get it done. And I think that's going to probably propel him up. And there was already even the reports before that bowl game that a lot of teams are actually valuing him higher than than a lot of people think. And I don't think that's a coincidence. That's all I'm saying. I think that he's a name that's going to be rising a lot, especially if they win next week, because you can just, we've seen it with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is that good of a quarterback, but how many times have people talked about quarterback wins are a stat and all this garbage about Jimmy wins, man? Jimmy wins. He's also the number one quarterback to win without scoring a touchdown, right? So, but it doesn't mean he's good and he deserves it, but I think that people overvalue winning, right? And he's done a lot of that with Georgia.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I just don't think he's like like when I think of Georgia in their little dynasty that they've had, I don't think of Stetson. You know,
Yeah, I
I
agree with
really,
you.
I mean, I feel he's done well with them, but I don't think he really been the key piece to a lot of their.
No, he
So
definitely hasn't propelled them for sure.
I feel he's a decent quarterback, but I honestly see him going like early day, like a fourth round pick. You know, I mean,
I don't know.
I mean, I think he would be lucky going.
So let's say for argument's sake, right? Because we talked about it already in the last couple of tiers, right? CJ Stroud, Anthony Richardson, we think probably both of those guys are going to be first round picks. You don't think Hendon Hooker, I think he should be, but you don't think Hendon Hooker will be a first round pick. Bryce Young will definitely be probably the number one overall pick after his performance in the Sugar Bowl.
Yep.
Will Levis more than likely will be a first round pick, right? So that's 4 quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't see anybody that we're going to talk about with tier 4 here jumping up into that top tier of quarterbacks, right? I don't think that they're going to be first rounders. I think Hendon Hooker and Stetson Bennett are the only 2 guys that could be first round picks. And how quarterback needy the league is right now, that's all I'm saying. I think that a couple of these guys might slip up there, and I don't think they're going to be high picks. I think they'll be later, like they trade to 30, 31 just to get these guys with a 5th-year option or something like that. But that's the only thing is I think that there's going to be more than 4 quarterbacks that go in the first round, and that's the only thing I'm kind of thinking here and looking at, especially since only one went last year. And I don't know. I just, I could see someone like Atlanta jumping up from they're using their second to move up to 31 or something, 32 even, and taking someone like Stetson Bennett. I think that Stetson Bennett would be perfect for someone like Atlanta. It's also a Georgia team there, and all they need is a game manager to not throw the ball away, right? So that's all I'm thinking. I agree with you. I don't love Stetson Bennett, I have the same concerns as you about the size and measurables, but again, I think that a lot of teams are going to value the game manager ability that he kind of has here.
Right. Well, I do think he's going to get drafted, but I don't think he's going to be special. I think I honestly feel he's going to be holding.
So would you?
And with that, like, there's nothing bad with that. I just don't think he's.
So here's a question then. So let's say Stetson Bennett ends up being a first round pick, where would you rank him in your, like, how would you value him then?
I mean, I would still put him below. I would put him probably the first. I would rather have all those quarterbacks.
Okay, so would you still? So rather have Stroud, Richardson, Bryce Young,
Absolutely.
Levis? Would you put him above Levis still, or Levis above him? I mean, just for the physical upside of Levis.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
and then Hendon Hooker too. Who would you rather have? Who would you rather have, Hooker or Bennett?
I would probably rather have Hendon Hooker because I know he's willing to sling it when he needs to.
Even if
I feel Stetson Bennett can. I feel I'm not saying he's a bad athlete. There for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
I would much rather have Hooker, and I've seen more from Hooker being able to make those all kind of throws and to put a team on his back when I don't necessarily think Stetson Bennett could do that on a consistent basis to be to be that high of a pick.
There you go. Okay. So you'd rather have, so let's say Hooker ends up being like third rounder, second, third rounder, and Bennett is a first rounder. Would you still rather have Hooker over Bennett? I mean, I would personally, but
Yeah, I would. Yes,
the NFL would be telling us we were wrong, but
yes.
they're not always right. But no, and that's the interesting with Sense and Bennett, and he's the one that, like I said, we're gonna have to watch him closely. And these are early rankings, so I'm ranking him in my top 6 guys here. I could definitely be wrong, and he could go much later than this. But again, I'm just trying to, be fair with where I think that these guys are going to get drafted and then what their ability is. And I don't think that Stetson Bennett is ever going to have a super high floor, but, I think that he has a super high ceiling, I guess. But I think he'll have a pretty safe floor if he gets draft capital. Now, again, just like with Will Levis, draft capital really plays a part into this. And I think that's kind of why we have a clear delineation between tier 1, definitely those guys that I feel safe drafting regardless of landing spot or draft capital. They're probably going to get the draft capital anyway, but I'm fine with it either way. Tier 2, draft capital is a little bit more important to me, but I think that these guys are still pretty safe and that they're gonna show out in the long run. Tier 3, it's kind of, they're not the safest, and then draft capital is going to be even more important on top of that. So I think that's kind of why we have this big, difference in opinion on these guys, and draft capital is going to be huge behind Will Levis and Stetson Bennett.
Oh, I fully agree with that.
So these are just a couple names. Again, these rankings are going to change over time, and especially as the hype and everything starts to build up on the off season. But again, I want to get these rankings out there early so that when the names and hype and all this starts rolling around, we're going to be able to track how it really moves these guys in the offseason, because there's going to be a lot of movement. At some point, you're probably going to hear rumors that Hendon Hooker is going to be the number 1 overall pick. It's just, that's how draft season goes, it feels like. And, these guys are going to move up and they're going to move down. And, oh, this guy said this one time back when he was 3 years old. And it's just like, there's so much in the draft season and the offseason that moves these guys' stock like crazy. So we wanted to get these guys' rankings out there early so we can kind of track it. But just, Bennett is a name that I'm telling you, he's going to shoot up the boards, just because, like, I think it'll ultimately end up being, and this is my honest opinion, I think it's going to be Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, number 1, number 2, Will Levis, number 3, Bennett, number 4, and Richardson, number 5. I think that's going to be your final consensus ranking on these guys, but we'll see how it goes. So that is tier 3. Any other thoughts on Bennett and Levis before we get out of here?
I think I've said all I need to about
hater, just because
I like his game. I just don't think I just don't think he's the NFL.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from on that, but maybe the best idea wasn't talking to an Ohio State fan right after a bowl.
No, I am fine with how the bowl game went. I'm actually pretty happy how it went. I'm more of the fan where I just want them to play well and to have.
That was a good game, man.
And
it really was.
And they did, and I am bummed out about the result, but hey, that's part of life. So.
Yep. So, all right, that is tier 3. We're gonna take a quick break here, and then we're gonna be right back with tier number 4. Thanks for listening, guys. All right, we are back now with tier 4 of our Dynasty quarterback rankings for 2023. If you've listened if you're listening to this overall video, this is going to sound redundant, but each one of these has been broken out into individual videos here. So if you haven't yet, go check out tier 1, 2, and 3. We got some interesting names up there. Tier 4 is where things really start to, go into those names that are just names to keep on top of your mind. There's the potential that none of these guys get any draft capital. 2 of these guys might even recommit to college. They haven't committed to the draft yet. So these are just names that are good to keep in your mind as we move forward here, and just to kind of familiarize yourself with them. I think there's a couple guys here that could be fantasy sneaky type of guys, but it's going to really kind of depend on their draft capital a lot. We talked about it just with the tier 3 group, if you haven't seen that video, but we talked about the different tiers. Tier 1 was the safest regardless of landing spot and draft capital. Tier 2, landing spot was a little bit more important, but we think that they're going to get high draft capital. Tier 3 is the ones where landing spot really matters, and then Tier 4 is where it's critical. Draft capital and landing spot. If these guys go somewhere where all these guys in this tier are probably going to be backups to start their NFL careers, but just like Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, a lot of these guys went later on, got an immediate opportunity, and were able to show out. So there's always that next guy. One of these guys might be it, and we're going to talk through them right here. So you ready to get into Tier 4 here, Dale?
Absolutely.
All right, so Tier 4, number one guy I've got here is going to be Cameron Ward. He plays for Washington State. He is someone who has not committed yet to the NFL draft, 6'2", 220 pounds. And he played his first 2 years. So I was trying to find stats on this guy, and I had to actually go to ESPN to find him. But he played his first couple of seasons in the FCS? Is that what it was, Dale?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And the FCS, so if you're unfamiliar, because I don't know college very well at all, and there's like 8 million conferences and everything, but FCS is actually where Trey Lance came from, that conference in college. And funnily enough, Cameron Ward is someone who's kind of built like Trey Lance, 6'2", 220 pounds. Did his best work. He was very mobile through his time in college. Through his 3 seasons as the starter, 220 rushing attempts, on the ground. And, college stats, have no idea what his actual yardage is, probably somewhere in the couple hundreds there. But, it's crazy because it says he had 222 rushing attempts, 121 yards. So that's pretty bad, but 8 touchdowns. So he had to have been averaging at least 1 per, just to get those touchdowns. And it's funny, he had a long of 45 in this last season, but whatever. College stats are stupid. But no, the funny thing is, he absolutely went nuclear in the FCS. He was so dang good in the FCS. And then he goes to Washington State this year. I guess all the coaches that drafted him and, really believed in him, set up the game plan around him to set the record. He broke his school's record for touchdowns in 2 seasons just because he was that good. They all left the program, so he transferred out of the school, entered the transfer portal, and went to Washington State. So his stats, if you look at them, are really impressive. So I'm not going to break it down by year. I'm going to just do career here. 1,390 attempts. That is an astronomical number of passing attempts for a college player. His sophomore year, he had 590 passing attempts in 10 games. That is insane. That is just so many passing attempts there. This last year, 497. So to say that this guy is comfortable throwing the ball would be an understatement, right? 10,000 yards in college is incredible. 64% completion percentage and 94 touchdowns, 23 interceptions through 3 seasons. He had 47 in his sophomore year, same year that he had 590 attempts there. So he is someone that is very interesting to me, feels very good. And when I say he is a Trey Lance type of prospect, that's who he reminds me of, man. He just looks like him. He's built like him a little bit, and he's got a great arm. And he's just someone that, again, I really like to see what he can do. If he does commit to the NFL, it's still undeclared at this time. But do you have any thoughts on Cameron Ward as we're moving through here?
Yeah, he's very raw in the sense that, like, he hasn't really been a D1 starter for that many games. It's only 1 year. And the competition compared to the Pac-12 to the FCS school vastly different. And I feel at Washington State he played pretty well. He very willing passer. I think he's going to be someone to watch for. I honestly think he should stay another year just to kind of refine his skills a little bit. Um, because like his yards per completion were a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only 6.5, which that's not. I mean that's not bad, but I mean it's
Pretty
compared to the
low.
other
Pretty
quarterbacks.
low.
Yeah, it's pretty low. I didn't really watch him
Right.
to be
What are you
very honest.
are you kidding me, man? This is the pinnacle of college football.
So I haven't watched a lot of tape on him, but I will say that he's going to be someone to look out for. I can see him being I mean, if he does go in the draft, I can see him being like an early day 3 guy,
Mm-hmm.
like around the Stinson Bennett draft range because of his potential.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see where he goes because ultimately the reason why I have him down here in tier 4 is I think that he will ultimately recommit to college for one
Mhm.
more year just to get a little bit more on tape there. Because of his great 2 seasons in the FCS, I think that he just needs to put one more year together with Washington State here and kind of show what he can do. Um, there's a lot of positives to his game, but again, there is just not enough there to kind of fully evaluate it because of the competition level in the FCS, like you're talking about there. So, I think we'll see what he does. Ultimately, if he commits to the NFL draft, for me, he's probably going to jump up to tier number 3. But I'm kind of hedging here because I don't think he'll ultimately be there. But I think for 2024, if he does go back to school, he's definitely a name to watch. There's already quite a few names in the 2024 draft class for quarterbacks that are really interesting. You got Caleb Williams with USC, Quinn Ewers with Texas.
Texas.
Um,
Yep.
Drake May, I think, is another guy
Yep.
for the 2024 draft class. So it's going to be a pretty good quarterback class next year. But Cameron Ward, if he goes back, he might be able to solidify himself as one of those top 5 guys, kind of like Will Levis or Hendon Hooker for me, in that draft class. But yeah, I like this guy. I like what he has the potential for. But again, we just kind of need to see a little bit more of what he can do, I think, from a college perspective. So I think he's going to recommit, but you never know. Definitely this time of year, take nothing for granted.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I don't think he's ready yet, and like with all these other quarterbacks that have already been declaring for the draft, like he's one that hasn't yet. And
Mm-hmm.
I believe the date to declare, I think, is here in a. I believe,
Mm-hmm.
I believe, so like he has a couple weeks to decide, but I really think he's going.
Yeah, I feel like if he was going to commit, he probably would have done it by now.
Yeah,
So that's
yeah,
probably why. But yeah, just a name to kind of keep in mind. Again, with these early rankings, if he does commit, he will definitely jump up a tier for me. I like him more than Will Levis and Stetson Bennett, to be honest with you. I would prefer this guy over both of them. But, I don't think he'll get the draft capital in this year's draft class.
yeah.
And that's the only downside for Cameron Ward. But good player for sure. Definitely a good player. Keep your eye on Cameron Ward moving forward. All right, the next guy I want to talk about here is another guy I don't think that he's going to commit, right? I think he has one more year of college eligibility. Am I right here? Bo
I believe
Nix.
so. Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so Bo
Yeah, he
Nix
does.
is the quarterback currently for Oregon. And again, if he recommits, that quarterback class in 2024 is going to be ridiculous. I like this guy quite a bit. Again, he's got the prototypical size of a quarterback. He's 6'3", 214 pounds. He's a big dude. Plays for Oregon, was with Auburn for 3 years. So he's got 4 years of starters experience. And again, just like Cameron Ward, this is just how crazy Cameron Ward was. We just read his stats off, but through 4 years, Bo Nix has 1,400 completion or 1,400 attempts 63% completion percentage, and almost the same number of yards as Cameron Ward. A lot less touchdowns than Ward, and it's just really impressive. That just goes to show how good Cameron Ward was, and I get it. It was the FCS, but he was killing it over there. So just something to keep in mind when we're talking about Ward. But Bennett is a guy, or sorry, Bo Nix. You got me thinking about Stetson Bennett now. Bo Nix is somebody who is kind of interesting. And, he was with Auburn, like I said, for 3 years. Wasn't the best. His completion percentage did continuously get better, 58%, 60, 61%. Not that great, though, with Auburn. He goes over to Oregon. It's the Pac-12, so it's a downgrade in terms of conference, but really saw his usage get a lot better over in Oregon. 409 attempts this last year, 72% completion percentage. His yards per attempt jumped up by about 2 yards per attempt. His yardage went up to 3,600 yards, 29 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Really had himself a great year this year. And that's why I think he's ultimately going to go back to play for one more year, just to build on this year and kind of show this is the standard that we can expect from this guy. Just because Auburn was not great, right? It was just not a good time at Auburn. And then he goes to Oregon and he's killing it over there. So any thoughts on Bennett, or you got me saying
Bo
Bennett
Nix.
now, on Bo Nix
Nix.
here?
Yes. Yeah. So with Bo Nix, I do like him. I've kind of followed his career a bit, and like him going into Auburn in 2019, like he was seen as their savior a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and he never really lived up to the hype. I do feel he's a good improviser, and he's a very smart quarterback, but I feel he did struggle against a more typical NFL style defenses compared to in the Pac-12, where it's just run and gun and just hope and pray somebody
Yeah.
stops somebody.
Yep.
So
72%
feel
completion percentage, though, is pretty impressive. Even if
it is very, very good. It is very good. I feel he played a lot better. I think he had more confidence,
mm-hmm.
and then I also think he had better athletes. Actually better athletes to throw to.
Yep.
It's compared to at Auburn, where like some of their like coaching hasn't been as good, so they haven't recruited as well. And honestly, like that plays a big part in a quarterback's trajectory in college and how they do with how the school is recruiting other players and their coaching staff too.
Mm-hmm.
Also with the Oregon, like I feel they played a more tempo offense compared to Auburn is. I mean, I wouldn't say it's traditionally like a run offense, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel they're probably a little bit more run heavy than at Oregon.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, 323 passing attempts in his last year with Auburn, just not great there. They just did not rely on him very much over in
Right.
Auburn. So the other positive for Bo Nix here is the usage on the ground as a mobile quarterback. And again, rushing stats are stupid, but he had 89 attempts this last year with Oregon for 510 yards. And you take into account he's going to have some sacks in there. So his 89 attempts for probably somewhere around like 700 maybe yards is pretty good. That is quite impressive on the ground. He had 14 rushing touchdowns this last year. So quite impressive there. He even had a receiving touchdown. Pretty funny there. But he was someone that definitely improved his game in Oregon, which is why we both think that he's going to go back here in 2023. But just again, a name to keep an eye on. If you're looking, if he does commit to 2023 in the NFL draft, he's someone that would jump up again. I'd prefer him over both guys in tier 3 right now, Bennett and Levis. I'd probably still prefer Cameron Ward over him, which is why we talked about him first here tonight. But, I think that he's someone that is worth keeping an eye on. But same as Ward, I think he would have committed by now if he was going to. So that's kind of why I think he's going back ultimately.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I really do like Bo Nix, and I feel he's gonna be. I feel he's gonna fit from another year in a system that going to reward his strengths.
Yep, I agree with that 100%. So, yeah, it's going to be, dude, 2024 is going to be crazy. You've got so
It's going
many
to be
guys. Those
loaded.
guys I already mentioned. You
Yes.
got probably Cameron Ward, Bo Nix. You got DJ
Yep.
whatever the hell
Yeah,
his name
him.
is. Like, it's going to be a loaded draft class next year. And I
I
know
agree.
that's the one thing. I was listening to a podcast earlier, and they were talking about, his 2023 draft already a bust because it's lost so much hype the last couple weeks and everything. And it's pretty funny just thinking about it. Like 2024 has got so much potential to it
Mm.
already, and everyone was so blinded by 2023 that it might not matter. But yeah, it's crazy. So Bo Nix, good player. We'll see what he ultimately does. So he might drop off this list. And honestly, we're getting to the point where, outside of those top 6 guys, these are the only 2 that are really interesting. The last 2 we're going to touch on pretty quickly, but just a couple guys that are a little more interesting here. The next guy is going to be Tanner McKee. This guy I just want to mention because I think he is committed to this year's draft class already.
He is.
Okay.
He is.
And he's worth mentioning just because of the measurables. Will Levis,
Mm-hmm.
he has all the the Josh Allen you could want. This dude is 6'6", 230 pounds. He is a giant out there. He's just a huge human being. Quarterback for Stanford. Stanford hasn't created a good quarterback since who? Andrew Luck? Is that the last one?
Davis Mills, come on, man.
Oh yeah, great. He's got a neck like Davis Mills, so maybe that's what they're
I
kind of
know he does.
genetically
It's very
creating these guys in a lab. Stats wise, though, not the most impressive. He is a junior. He's got 2 years of play time. His sophomore year, 315 attempts, 65% completion, 2,300 yards, 15 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. This last year, this is kind of concerning a little bit to me. Big increase in passing attempts, 426. Dip in completion percentage, which you kind of expect there. The more, if you pass it more, you're going to get more of a realistic completion percentage. So, 62% is probably more accurate to where he's at right now. 2,900 yards, 13 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So the touchdowns actually went down, though, with a big increase in attempts, which is a little concerning there. But on the ground in the rushing department, he did have 74 attempts this year for negative 90 yards. So I don't actually know what it is, but
on that, like, it's a big thing that I see is that he was sacked almost twice the amount of what he was
yes,
this year to last year,
yeah,
which I mean, the Stanford offense was atrocious,
mm-hmm.
and they've been very bad his 2 years that he started.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has a lot to do with his stats.
Yeah.
And them just not having the athletes around him at least look serviceable.
Yeah, that's the one thing with Stanford is, sometimes they create some great players, but they're so rare. It's hard to kind of predict there. But yeah, I think the fact that he had 135 attempts, though, we were talking about C.J. Stroud. I think he had like 75 through 3 years. So
Right.
it's just he's willing to get out there, and with his size and his ability, if he tests well, he's someone that could be kind of sneaky. Ultimately, this guy feels like someone who's going to convert to tight end here in a couple years, probably. But he's just someone worth keeping your eye on. Again, I don't really love him. The offense hasn't been good. He's not been elite, but Stafford hasn't been a great bastion of talent for the last couple of years. So there is that little caveat to it. But he is worth keeping an eye on. Again, if he ultimately sneaks into like the 4th, 5th round, I wouldn't be too surprised. He's going to be a backup for sure. But with those stats, he could always be like the Davis Mills route, find himself into a starter role for as kind of a, what can we do with this guy? But we'll see what he can do there. Any thoughts on McKee before we move on to the last guy?
No, I do agree with all what you said. I think I think he's going to be. I feel he's going to be better than what you have. I
Maybe.
would rather have I would rather have him in his potential over a guy like Stinson. They keep bringing up
Draft capital is going to
Bennett.
come down big on that one, though. Like I said, I
It
think
is.
Bennett could.
It is. I mean, I honestly feel these two players are going to have similar draft cap, in my opinion.
Right,
But
and
that's
that
but
we'll see. We ultimately we'll
yeah.
see. It again, not to hammer it too much, but if Bennett does sneak into the first, which honestly, I'm telling you, man, he's gonna jump just because of the winning. Like people overvalue winning.
That's not always true because
Not everyone
I,
does,
I
but bad
no,
teams
no,
do. Bad players
I
do.
agree. I agree. I agree. But back in like 2006, when like Troy Smith won his Heisman,
Hmm.
and he was a really good player for Ohio State. Like he went in the 6th round.
It's possible, but Bennett's been good. Bennett's been serviceable. So we won't derail this with talking about Bennett too much. But I think that if these guys had similar draft capital, I agree with you 100%. I'd rather have McKee there. Let's say they're both 3rd round picks. I would rather have McKee. I think Bennett's going to go higher than that, and that's kind of why I have him ranked above. But similar draft capital, that's out the window. I don't love Stetson Bennett that much. I just
Right.
think that teams are going to value him higher than you and I do, right? So that's just the caveat there. But no, I'm with you. I would rather have McKee as well. He's 6'6". He's more Josh Allen than Bennett is for
Absolutely.
sure. So
Absolutely.
no, so McKee is definitely someone to keep an eye on as we move forward here. And again, the final tiers, he probably, I have a feeling that we're probably going to still have 4 tiers when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
And Bennett might end up staying where he's at, and, Levis falls down, or there's going to be some movement here for sure. But McKee is definitely someone to keep an eye on as we move forward. Who realistically is probably going to be like, McKee's going to be like, is that big guy. When we went to the combine a few years ago, I forget his name, but the giant guy, he ultimately did end up converting to tight end. I forget what his name was, Jackson something.
It was Tyrese Jackson.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. So, that's who he kind of reminds me of a little bit here. Just all the measurable talent in the world, but couldn't cut it as a quarterback. But we'll see.
Right.
He's going to Stanford, so he's probably pretty smart, hopefully.
Probably.
Who knows? All right. So last guy here, and we are going to wrap it up with this guy. Last guy in the top 10 rankings here, quarterback number 10. Neither Dale and I like this guy. If you've ever seen anything on this player, you would know, seems like kind of an asshole, to be honest with you. But
Absolutely.
Spencer Rattler is the guy that we're going to be talking about here. And Spencer Rattler, 6'1", 200 pounds. He's not a big guy. He's not the smallest guy. He could definitely put on some weight. He's got a frame for it, but he's someone that is very polarizing. And I will say, I was kind of expecting him to go back to college for one more year, because he did improve his draft stock a little bit, I feel like, this last year in South Carolina. So played for Oklahoma for 3 years. He had 3 games played, 11, and then he got benched in 2021. Only played 9 games in that season. Ironically, in 2021, his averages were out of this world.
Yeah.
Like his actual stats in 2021 when he got benched were actually pretty good. I didn't watch that season, but
ironically, he was benched for Caleb Williams.
Oh, that's fair then. Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah.
So I get it. I get it. Yeah, that dude's gonna be. If you can place a future bet. And now we're in Ohio, so we have sports betting now. That's great.
Yeah, we do.
If you want to make a bet that Caleb Williams is the number 1 overall pick in 2024, yeah, you're probably going to make some money on that. A futures bet there. But no, Spencer Rattler played 3 years with Oklahoma, got benched for Caleb Williams, transferred to South Carolina, and he actually played pretty well this year. And, as much as I dislike the personality of Spencer Rattler, I don't think he's really a great personality to be around. 350 attempts, 67% completion percentage, 2,800 yards, 16 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. Not great there. But then he ultimately decided to commit to the NFL draft. And, it's a little surprising. If you go back to 2020, his sophomore year, with Oklahoma. That was his best season by far. 317 attempts, 68% completion percentage, 3,000 yards, 28 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and then, it fell off a cliff the next couple years there. He's someone who is not afraid to kind of get out on the run as well. He uses his mobility pretty well. Through his time in college, he has 12 rushing touchdowns. He has about 193 rushing attempts, so he's not afraid to kind of get out there and move it. But yeah, he's someone that he's hard to evaluate for me. So maybe you can speak on him a little bit more than me, because like I said, everything I've ever seen about this guy is he seems like kind of an ass, and he doesn't really, he puts a lot of blame on his teammates, and
I agree. Yeah, no, and I've been seeing that too. I feel he's a very, very low character guy. I think a lot of people like him, and I feel he wore out his welcome in Oklahoma. I mean, it was a big thing with him last year, was that he was having a bad game against Texas, and then Caleb Williams came in and played excellent, and then they ended up winning that game. So, I and then after that game, he was really upset about that and thought he should have been a starter. And
yep.
I just don't think there was so much hype with him coming in. I think he was, I think he was like a top 5 player in his class. I mean, in his class, he quarterback coming out, supposed to be the next thing after Kyler Murray, and get a guy who everybody and thinks he's the next coming of of like Steve Young or whatever. I just don't think he can read a defense very well. I think he tries to play with his legs too much, and I kind of view him as like a Zach Wilson. He had one good year, and it was against Big 12 competition, and he still kind of stunk it up sometimes, in Big 12 competition. So I don't like him very much. I mean, I think he's gonna get on an NFL roster because of his intangibles. I do feel he's very gifted, but that only gets you so far.
He's got a great arm, but yeah, I think that the biggest thing for Spencer Rattler here is, we talked about it, the last couple years not been great, but you go back to his 2020 season, his best season, first season as a full starter that year, played 11 games, and I already read the stats to you earlier, but it was a good season for him for sure that year. And, that's what a lot of teams, and we're looking at it, the draft, and we expect everyone to be capable and everything, but they are not not every team is the most logical. They don't think things through the best, right? Well, there's guys that are going to look at that 2020 season and say, I mean, but he did it, he has that potential. Maybe we can get it out of him. And that's the only reason why he's worth mentioning here. Ultimately, he has the potential to go as like a top 4th round or better pick. I don't think he will, because again, I don't think a lot of people really kind of like him. But again, I have heard a lot of good things from him out of South Carolina this year, that he really kind of revamped his image. He didn't go crying to the media after everything. So maybe teams are going to look at it and say he's kind of gotten a little bit better, look at 2020 and think that they can get that out of him again if they give him a little bit of time to, let's say let's, for example, just throw a hypothetical out there. Let's say the Lions take him in the 3rd round to sit behind Jared Goff for the next couple of years. It's worth stashing at that point in your rookie league. So he's somebody that's worth just keeping an eye on. Ultimately, I don't think he's going to have a super high draft capital. Like I said, I think he'll be a 3rd, 4th round, probably 4th round pick. Someone that's just willing to take a chance on him at that point. But just stashing at the end of the 2nd, maybe 3rd round wouldn't be too bad in a super flex. So he might ultimately, because of his name value, go higher than that. But yeah, that's about the limit of where I would probably take him in my rookie drafts, unless he gets a massive like 2nd round investment from a team.
I agree, and I don't foresee that happening. I hope he goes to the combine, because I think that's going to help him out. I mean, I know it's trendy these days to kind of skip the combine and do your own pro days.
Yeah.
But that's what Zach Wilson did, I'm pretty sure. And
I don't
You
think
know,
they had a
I kind of
combine Zach Wilson's year, if I remember right, because of the
well,
COVID.
well, 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 I believe he skipped out on the combine. I think he did. He might have skipped out on the combine and just did his pro day. Like that's
Mm.
what a lot of quarterbacks have been
Yeah, we'll
lately.
see. We will see.
And
So I think I
I
agree
mean,
with you. If he goes to the combine, it would definitely benefit him for sure.
yeah, it's going to help. You know, I feel he has the talent. It's just what he does with his talent. You know, I
Hmm.
don't think he has any dog in him or anything like that. Like, you know, it's going into 21 season. Like he was the betting favorite to be the number one pick, to be the
Yeah,
Heisman Trophy winner,
crazy.
and then
And then gets
you know,
benched.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
and then he's benched and embarrassed at Oklahoma, and then he runs away to South Carolina where they aren't going to cover him.
Hmm.
You know, so you know, I don't trust that. I don't like that. Don't like Spencer Rattler. And then the wrap up, and then the wrap up my Spencer Rattler talk. Like I would rather have Stetson Bennett, Spencer
Oh
Rattler.
my.
I would any day,
I was
any
just gonna
day.
ask you actually. Let's say they're both third round
Yeah,
picks. Would you rather have Bennett?
I would rather. I
I
mean,
think
as
Bennett's
like
safer.
my team, like on my team, I'd rather have Stetson Bennett. For fantasy, I'd rather have Rattler
Probably, yeah.
because of his potential.
But yeah, I'm kind of with you there. I think that the floor with Bennett would probably be higher, but the ceiling with Rattler definitely is there. He's got a lot of
Yeah, it
potential,
is.
but he's pretty raw there. So
Yes.
from a personality standpoint, so
Yes.
all right. So just to recap real quick, this is the last ranking of the quarterbacks. We're going to be getting into the more fun positions here. Running backs
Yeah.
next week. I'm more excited about those guys. Oh my goodness, those guys are going to be fun. My rankings on the running backs, I already finished those, and they're going to be interesting. And then we're going to be following up with the wide receivers and finally finishing up with the tight ends after that. That one we probably take one player per episode just because there's not that many, so just to fill in that week. But no,
Right.
we'll get to the tight ends here in a couple weeks. But no, hopefully you guys all congratulations on any championships you guys might have won this week with your leagues. But yeah, we're rocking and rolling for 2023, getting through these guys, and then we're gonna be rolling hard into the off season, try and get a couple mock drafts and stuff here in the next couple weeks, couple months. And yeah, we're going to be hitting this off season pretty hard. So thank you guys for joining. Recap real quick. Tier number 1 for me. And again, these are all my rankings. Dale did not give his. We can probably get his later on in the off season, but my pre rankings are CJ Stroud number 1, Anthony Richardson number 2. Those guys in a tier of their own. Hendon Hooker at 3, Bryce Young at 4. Those guys in tier number 2. Stenson Bennett and Will Levis in tier 3. Cameron Ward, Bo Nix, Tanner McKee, and Spencer Rattler in tier number 4. So thank you guys for joining me. Let me know over on Twitter what you guys think about these rankings, who I'm right on, who I'm wrong on. I'm sure everyone's going to be coming for my head for Bryce Young, but, go listen to that breakdown and why the short man, the little midget, why I'm not willing to risk everything on him for fantasy football. But, let me know who you're right or who you agree with, who you disagree with. You can find me over on Twitter at TDC_Calvin, Dale on Twitter at Dynasty_Dale. Drop a comment, leave a subscription, like whatever you can, anywhere you're listening to the podcast. It just helps out with the algorithm. If there's anything else, let us know. Thank you guys so much for joining us for these quarterback rankings. Have a good night.